Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Healing Conversations. My name is Zainab Avni. I am an energy healer and alignment coach. And this podcast, Healing Conversations, is all about natural healing or inspirational healing or really stories that you all really wanting to hear. So let's get started and let me introduce you to today's guest, Terri Sterk. Terri, it's wonderful to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Excellent. So tell us something about you.
Well, I think we met because we're both looking at healing. Yeah, I am a wellness coach and author. I am a two-time breast cancer survivor. So they happened 10 years apart. So that got me thinking about what I could do to heal myself, and I found many, the normal medical ways, but then there were things I did outside of that, because when cancer hits, it hits the whole being, especially breast cancer, emotional, our souls, physical, our spirits, everything. And so I had lots of healing to do. And so that's how I came to do what I do, is I figured it out for myself, so I started teaching it to other survivors.
And so I'm really curious actually. So did you heal yourself in both times, or I mean, did you go down a route before you start realizing that there was emotional healing as well as physical in that journey? How was that the first time around, I guess?
Yeah, I was a part of, I called it the sandwich generation, where I had little kids and I had elderly parents. So I was kind of caught in the middle of taking care of both. And so that's what happened, is I was going through this journey, but also needing to help other people. And so I pushed myself too hard. Oh, I'm done. Let's just get with it. And then I was back at my dad's house helping him, and making sure my kids got what they needed. But what I learned is that I wasn't healed. I had some setbacks because I had pushed my physical body too quickly, but also emotionally, I saw myself highly stressed and lots of anxiety. And so I'm like, this is not me. This is not how I used to be. So how do I get myself back? And no one really tells us when we go through big medical situations that we're going to have other healing to do besides just the physical. And so that's what I figured out by learning that I had done too much, and that my anxiety levels were way too high. So I figured it out, though, by talking to other women who'd been there and helping other women. I learned first that the biggest help to myself was helping others. That helped me understand what I was going through better. So as long as I've been coaching in the wellness and health space, I've healed even more. And maybe you've figured that out too. When we're giving to others, we learn so much about ourselves. And so I learned how to thrive instead of just survive. And so that's where I'm at today.
And so I'm a little bit curious, like you say, the first time around, you noticed that there was a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety. You were caught up in between everyone needing to help and wanting to help, and actually not looking after yourself as much as maybe you could or should have.
Yeah.
And and then you healed, right? I mean, either naturally or with chemo and all of that, but you healed. And then life continued. But then the second diagnosis came around. And I imagine that I mean, I know from people that I speak with that the second time around is very scary, because I think from what people I was talking to, it feels like the second time around it's more deadly in a sense. Like you have less
Yes.
chances of recovering from that than you did the first time around. So what was that like for you?
Well, the second time I knew too much, first of all, which is a good thing and a bad thing because I had been through it before. So I had all the questions like, this is what we did before. How is it going to be different this time? My second cancer was not a reoccurrence, it was a new tumor. And so that was the good news, is that we had cured the first cancer. Now we're just going to do it again. But there are certain chemos they won't give twice. So that's why it's called a medical practice. They're practicing. Plus, the type of breast cancer I had was triple negative breast cancer, which just means I had no apparent reason I got cancer. They couldn't figure it out. I was tested for all the hereditary genes and was negative for all of those, which was actually good news because I didn't want my daughter or my nieces to have to deal with the worry of carrying a gene. But so anyway, the second time it was harder because I made more, I'll say, drastic decisions on how to stop this from ever happening again. I had a total mastectomy, both breasts. Because I had cancer in each breast, I was just ready to be done. And so I had the double mastectomy. I had reconstruction, which had complications. So the whole journey was just harder the second time. But I had learned about emotional healing, and that helped. It helped me calm my anxiety. I also talked to counselors who were very helpful during that journey because I knew I needed the help, where the time before, 10 years prior, I didn't know. I just thought I needed to get through the medical stuff. So to answer your question, it was more difficult in a lot of ways, but it was easier that I knew more what to expect. And so that was helpful.
See, I didn't realize that what you just said, that a reoccurrence means that it's the same tumor, I guess, or location coming back, and
Yeah.
you can develop a second cancer, and that's not considered a reoccurrence. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I was surprised by that too. But the way my doctor explained it to me is that it's very unusual for a cancer to pass from one breast to the other. And so through their testing, they were able to determine that it was brand new cancer, a brand new tumor, and that it was not a reoccurrence from the original tumor. I did have lymph node involvement the first time, which means the cancer had spread outside of the breast, but the chemo and radiation took care of that, so it never reappeared in that breast or anywhere else. The second time in the opposite breast, I did not have any lymph node involvement. It was a very small tumor. It was right on the surface, so I easily felt it. And knowing what I knew about breast cancer, I was, on the phone with my doctor immediately. So that was helpful to know as much as I knew. But yep.
And so, tell me a little bit about the emotional healing that you now knew that it was needed, or that really this was the direction that you could see yourself going.
Yeah, it's about coping skills mostly, meaning because we're women, we have families, we have a lot going on, we work, there's lots of negative things that happen. Bad things happen to good people. It does happen. And so it's not just cancer that I've dealt with. I've had lots of loss in my family with parents and a brother-in-law and dear friends. So lots of loss. And I have some family estrangement too, where we just don't talk to each other with siblings. And so all of those things create the person I am, not just the cancer. And so when I started my journey of emotional healing, I realized I had the worry of cancer, but I also had all these other traumas coming at me. And so I had to find a way to control that. And that was with the coping skills. I learned different techniques for helping relax myself. I have done yoga, and so I attribute a lot of my healing to yoga. I had been doing yoga for about 15 years. So it was a part of my second journey that I didn't have my first journey as much. And so that helped my healing, body, mind, and spirit, because I was doing yoga during my treatment. As soon as I would feel like it, I would go to class and do some stretching and meditating. I also did acupuncture, which helped with some of the pain of surgery and chemo. But the coping skills were the biggest contributor to my healing, just understanding deep breathing, and I mentioned the acupuncture, and I had the tapping. I had a friend who taught me that. So there was just lots of things I could do to help control the anxiety when bad things happen. And so that's what I do for other women, is help them understand how to control, or control isn't the right word, but how to help themselves, good self-care, but help themselves when bad things happen, because there will be more bad things. So having been through cancer, I learned those skills, and that helps me with my life now post-cancer. I'm now 12 years out from the cancer, but the other things that I've mentioned, there is also alcoholism in my family. And so there's just a lot to deal with. And I'm not unusual. We all have a lot going on. So learning to deal with those things is how we thrive, because then we can continue to thrive through life, even when bad things happen.
And so in terms of anxiety, for example, and stress, that, like you said at the beginning, is something that you experienced very much, at the beginning, or at least first time around, but of course there was still some of that later on. So how do you explain anxiety and stress in connection to the cancer?
Well, in the beginning, I'm now 12 years out, so I'll just kind of describe that anxiety 12 years ago. Because it was the second time, they, meaning the medical people, were monitoring me more closely, trying to understand why this happened, but also making sure it didn't happen again, or if it did, we'd find it quickly. And so the anxiety, I recall, like when I had an appointment 2 weeks from now, I would get very anxious, like my heart beating faster, and night sweats and just concern about what was coming. But I could feel it in my body that I was physically anxious. And that's what yoga and the breathing helped me control, because I could breathe deep breaths and exhale deeply and bring the calm back into my body. Then I could emotionally and mentally deal with the situation. So now I don't feel that anxious stuff as much. It's more, but I do get stressed. I've had some stress recently, but it's breathing and getting back to my mat, which is my yoga, and understanding how that can help me. The science behind moving our bodies and eating nutritious foods, healing our mind, all of that contributes to the whole person and being healthy. And so there is a difference between anxiety and stress. And I know people who have intense anxiety and have a really hard time controlling it themselves. And so they need medication to help. But I try to avoid taking more pills. I want to be able to find ways to control it without medical intervention. And that was possible for me. And I know it is for other people too.
Yeah. And so I want to talk a little bit more about the work that you do with loss and bereavement and all of that. How did that come about?
I started support groups. I facilitated 2 support groups. There were 2 major hospitals in my city, and they each had cancer units. And so there were support groups at each of the hospitals, and they worked with each other. So we would meet one month at one hospital and the next month at a different hospital. And so I went back and forth facilitating groups at both hospitals. That's how I got started, working with other women. And I was still working full-time while I was doing that. That was something I did outside of work. Then now I'm working on, I did some training to create a cancer ministry at my church. And so I'm working on, I did the training, and now I'm working with my church to figure out how I can make that work. And it would be a monthly meeting with women or probably men too, because it could be all kinds of different cancers. But that would have a Christian focus. We'd be using our faith to help us heal.
So how would you, I mean, faith, I understand. How does that get into this emotional healing that you found yourself doing for yourself first?
Well, that is the last book I wrote. It's a devotional for women. And so the way that helps me is I can't control all the things that are happening in the world or even to me. And so I can pass that anxiety or that stress to the higher power to help. And it's amazing because all of a sudden it's not me that's dealing with it. It's off my plate, basically. Another thing I do, I'll just show you. This is a vase, and you can see it's just full of all kinds of little papers. But what I do is, if I'm having an anxious moment or there's a situation that's creating a problem, I can write my prayer or write my anxious feelings on a little piece of paper. I put them in this vase, and then they're gone. It's just kind of the physical, the physical practice of writing it and then putting it away takes it out of my life. Because those are the things I can't control. And that's what God helps me do too, is I can just pass the pain to someone else.
But in terms of dissociation, right? Because here you are having a body sensation, right? The depression, the anxiety, the stress, the pain, the fears, all of these things. And then you say, okay, so I remind myself that I can give it all to higher power, higher spirit, and you write it down. But how do you then really let that go? How do you say, well, now it's no longer mine, and I've given it all away?
Yeah, the physical writing, folding it and putting it in the vase helps me to let go. Actually, that's another book I'm working on, how to let go. And so I'm going to do more research on it to be able to write the book. But the physical, taking something emotional and making it physical helps me to let it go. Everything that goes in that vase, it never comes out. It just stays there. And I've been filling that with papers for probably 4 years now. And so I just keep sticking them in there. There was another event or process that I participated in. Again, it was at my church. But we had candles in this big vat, and they were all lit, just small candles. And we would actually write our pain and then burn it. And that's kind of the same premise, where you're taking something, the pain that's emotional pain, but making it physical by writing it and then burning the paper. That was another approach that we use. I'm not sure if I answered your question.
Yeah, no,
but that works for me.
Yeah.
Making the emotional, and again, yoga is helpful there, because I could get on my mat and be in emotional distress, but just doing the stretching and the meditation is helpful in letting go. Or a walk in nature is another thing that I like to do.
Yeah. And so tell me a little bit about the books that you've got. I understand there's 3 and 1 on the way, right?
Yeah. The first one that I wrote is Thrive After Breast Cancer. This is my story, and also I think it's about 15 other women contributed to this book. So it's because cancer impacts all of us differently. And so that's why I brought in other stories, so that we could, okay, this happened to me, this is how I handled it, this is how she handled it. And that way we can learn from each other. And so there are lots of great stories in here. Then I wrote Nurture Emotional Well-Being, and this focuses on the emotional healing that happens after a challenging event or a trauma in our lives. Again, there are lots of survivor stories in here, women who've been through horrific events, not just cancer, but other things. And, betrayal and widows, divorce, lots of things that happen. And so those stories are in here as well. When I write books, I write stories. there's science in here. I mean, there's things we can do to help ourselves, but there's also the stories of the women who use those skills. Then my most recent one is this one, Devotional for Women. And this is the one, it's Christian focused for Christian women or any woman who just wants 90 days of encouragement. So right now I'm working on a book study, and I have about 15 women participating. So they're reading the book right along with me. And it's a daily devotion. And so right now we're working on 2 weeks worth of devotions, and then we'll meet next week as a group, talk through what we've learned about ourselves or what additional questions we might have. So I wrote the book with scripture and then a devotion based on, or just to help the reader to apply that scripture to their own life. And then there's a journaling prompt so that they can take what they've read and then actually write how it can be used in their own life. And so we just started, and we're on chapter 2. I wrote this book in chapters. So, for example, the second chapter that we're working on right now is called Strength in Faith. And so each of these devotions are about how we can use faith to create strength in ourselves, to strengthen our own emotional well-being, our mental, how we can deal with additional traumas. So those are my three books that I have published. I also wrote a small one. This was my first book, Inspiration for Breast Cancer Survivors. But it's very small, maybe 50 pages. Yeah, right at 50 pages. But I wrote this as a resource for women just to take with them when they go to their doctor or to chemo. It's my story, but it's things that I learned, lessons I learned, and then they can use it to create their own questions for their own medical team. But those are my books. I'm working on 2 more right now, and have ideas for several others. So that's what I do. It's always what I've wanted to do is write books. When I was young, I used to write poems and short stories and give them to my grandma, and she would help me with them. She was a teacher in her early days, and so she loved reading the things that I wrote. And now my daughter loves to write too, so it's kind of something that I'm passing along to the next generation also.
And I want to go back to understanding a little bit more about this emotional healing. I mean,
okay.
For me, in the work that I do, I always talk about the emotional root cause of anything that people are going through. And I know that, of course, physical is how it manifests in our bodies, but actually there has to be an emotional root. There's always some sort of an emotional compartment element of the illness or condition. So for me, when I work with people on emotional healing, I really want to go into that place to really understand what was going on.
Right.
I mean, like you say, for example, with stress or anxiety, it can take longer, right? It's not a one-off. It's not necessarily just an event. It's, of course, with how we do things, there's a lot of time habits and patterns that at play as well. So what are some tips or advice can you already share now with our listeners about what to do if they're experiencing, well, of course, if they have cancers or other chronic conditions, that they can start understanding how to address the emotional part of the healing?
Yeah. Well, I mentioned all the different sorts of events or traumas that created stress and anxiety in my own life. And so I use those stories. First of all, here's how I felt when this happened to me. Here's how I dealt with it. Sometimes when we have that pain, that I've met many women who just shove it under the carpet, just let it go.
Yeah.
And and I try to help them understand that talking through that pain, feeling the emotion, is actually the appropriate way to handle it, even if, no matter how awful it is. We gotta feel the feelings and come out the other side, because if we just ignore it and not deal with it, that pain will come back. It'll come back with a blow up in a relationship where you have an argument, but you're anxious about something else that happened, so you're arguing about something that doesn't even matter, but there's so much emotion behind it because you've not healed what happened before. And I know that's happened to me, where we don't, I was raised in a house like that where we didn't talk about our feelings. So it was stop crying, or, go to your room and get yourself together. Those were how it was solved. That's why I have some estrangement in my family with siblings, because they don't talk to each other. We don't talk to each other. And I talk. And they never liked that. It was hard. So someone who won't heal isn't going to care for me because I'm the one who's talking and trying to heal. But that created relationship issues because I was trying to get them to ride the ride with me, and they wouldn't do it. But I think it's the serial situations that happen in our life that causes the biggest problem. And I talk about that in my emotional well-being book, because until we heal the past, it's hard to step forward. And you can't just leave it behind. You don't want to carry it with you. But if you heal what happened, then you can leave it behind and move forward. And so that's what I did. An example is when I decided I wanted to write my book, Thrive After Breast Cancer. And I'm a big journaler. Journaling is another healing modality that I've used. So I had a whole bunch of journals because I would journal how I felt certain days after my treatments. I would journal what I did to feel better. I journaled what I'm doing to prepare for the next treatment. So I had all this content to put into a book. But when I pulled out those journals, I couldn't read them again. I would read I'd read a few pages, and then I would just slam it shut and put it away, put it back on the shelf. Well, I learned quickly that I wasn't fully healed, and I don't think we ever fully heal. That's what I've figured out. But I had more healing to do before I could write that book. I couldn't even reread the journals without it triggering me and trigger those feelings. So that's what I mean, where if you don't heal the pain, it will come back. Something will trigger that pain to show up again. Our bodies feel trauma. The trauma can be something very physical, like major illness or surgery, or it can be trauma of something emotional trauma. But our bodies react the same way. At least that's what I believe. I'm not a doctor, so I can't say for sure, but that's what I learned about my own body. All these different traumas that I had, I felt it the same way in my heart, in my head, in my brain, the emotions. It felt the same, even if it was small compared to something large like the cancer. So I guess my point there is, if we're not healing ourselves as we move through life, then it all just congregates. We're carrying all that baggage with us as we move forward. And so that's what I try to help women understand is, let's heal it as it happens. Then you can move on and thrive, and you're better prepared to handle the future and whatever happens in the future.
And how can people release these trapped emotions that they have in their bodies?
Well, the first thing they have to do is recognize that they need to heal. Like I said, there are many women who won't do the work. It's too painful. And that story I told was how they feel. They get triggered, and so they just stop because they don't want to talk about it. I have a friend who's gone through alcoholic treatment for alcoholism, and that's a lot that they teach them too, is the triggers are going to cause you to drink again. Well, it's the same thing with emotional healing. The triggers are going to trigger me to self-sabotage, whether that's I'm not an alcoholic, but it might trigger me to go have a glass of wine, or to eat something I shouldn't eat, or yell at someone that doesn't deserve it. We all handle that emotion our own way, but I call it self-sabotage, because if we haven't healed, if that person doesn't want to heal, then I can't help them. That's why I do so many posts, and I do things just to help them think. And so they tell me, I love your posts, keep doing it. Because the things I say helps them to recognize, I have healing to do, because I trigger them. And then there are women who don't want anything to do with me because I trigger too much. But those aren't the women for me then. Again, I've been through trauma, and so I understand what we need to do to heal it, and that's why I wrote the book. Other women are in full-blown counseling with therapists, and that's great, because their deep depression or anxiety is something I can't help with. I'm not equipped to handle that. I'm equipped to use my story about my own healing to help other people, but I'm not a doctor. And so if they say, I think I need a therapist, I'm saying, then if you think you need a therapist, then you should go do that. I'm not going to try to persuade people not to have therapy. But some deep-seated feelings that have never been healed, a therapist is probably more equipped to handle that. My stories aren't going to be very helpful. But women who recognize what's happening to them and want my help, those are the ones who I can help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe as we're nearing to the end of our conversation, maybe you can share a success story of someone that you worked with and probably was very touched by the transformation story.
Yeah, there are several, but the one I love the most, I won't use names or anything, but she was young. I really I was 40 years old when I was initially diagnosed, which is young for cancer, a cancer diagnosis. And so I could relate with other young women, even though I'm now 60. I can still relate to the young women because I was young too when I was initially diagnosed. This person was young when she got her diagnosis. She had 2 little kids, just like I did. Our stories were so similar, but we live in different cultures. We live in different places in the world. But she still reached out to me all the time. She called me when she had her surgery, and I helped her through that. I sent her I sent her my books. But the success of her is that she attributes my stories to her own healing all the time because she actually used what I told her about. She didn't just listen to my story and let it go. She listened and acted on it. And it's a success story because now she's passed. She's about 3 years out, I think, and she's helping people herself. Because I told her that's how I healed, was helping other people. And now she's helping other people. And so I just think it's a beautiful thing. And we've done some lives together. She does her own lives in her own group, and I do lives. And so we've done them together. And so each of us telling our stories. So that's the big one that comes to mind. Is because she told me I helped her, and I can see that she's doing very well.
And it's exactly what you say, right? I mean, the people who are going to resonate with you, they're going to resonate with you, and they are the most fantastic, people to work with because they're really on the same wave, and you know that anything that you say really lands in exactly the way that you meant it, and it's really the most wonderful and rewarding journey for both of you.
Thank you. Yeah. It's great to see her success. I also am still in contact with a few women from my support groups, from 20 years ago. They're in my group on Facebook, and they still listen to what I have to say. Those are other success stories. They met me when we were just supporting each other at the hospital, but we're still connected. So I think that's what cancer does to women is we find each other and then we stay connected because we can teach each other new things or new ways of healing.
And I think there's also something to do with, it's like, in a way, it's like validation. A lot of the time, I really feel that as women, we don't, other people might not understand us as much as other women, and especially women that have been or are going through similar things. And it really is like a very tight knit group because it's maybe strangers won't necessarily understand it, but you do.
Yeah.
And so it's very helpful for the healing.
Yeah. Another one is survivor's guilt. It's real. I had it. The guilt, and I still feel it every now and then when women pass away or they're going through really awful cancer issues. But that survivor's guilt is also something I had to deal with. I lost a very close friend. I mean, when we talk about our circle, our closest circle of friends, she was in that circle. My 6 of us. She was in my circle of 6, and got breast cancer after me. It reoccurred, spread throughout her whole body, and she ended up passing away. That was a very hard time in my life, and I call it a trauma because I lost a dear friend to the same thing that I had. And why did she have to die and I didn't? I don't know the answer. I just think God had a different plan for me. And so I feel called to do what I do. I'm retired from my corporate job. I had a very successful job that I worked at for years. But it was when I was in my 50s. I was in my late 50s. I was actually 59, I believe, when I retired completely and started doing this. I don't work full time, but I write books and I help women, mostly full time. And that's what I'm called to do. And I'll do it as long as I can.
That's really wonderful, because I think that's really what it's all about, especially when we go through all of these traumas and we're able to turn them all around. And also, like you said, sharing and walking, helping other people is also helping us understand ourselves a little bit more. And,
yes, absolutely.
It all makes so much, it's so deep in that way.
You're right.
Yeah. So Terri, we are just about to finish our conversation. So first of all, thank you so much for being here with us today and for sharing your inspiring story, and the inspiring way in which you are helping and working with other people. And for anyone watching, I want to say that thank you, of course, for watching, and anything. All of Terri's social links and information will be in the show notes wherever you watch or listen to this podcast. And of course, if you've been inspired, then please do share this with anyone, your family, friends, network, so that we can together share this message with the world that healing is possible, and also really how much this personal support, how much it can really help in the healing journey. Yeah. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I am so happy to have joined you today.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure.
Thank you.